Hi, Kelly. How you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. I had the COVID jab today, so I'm feeling a little bit tired, but I'm guessing
Ah,
you must be more tired because it's a different time, isn't it? Is it very early in the morning there?
yeah, it's actually not too bad because I'm in New Mexico, so it's 8 o'clock in the morning here. So that's actually that was good. Yeah. I think when Kendall was sending me the times earlier, he was using West Coast times, which is an hour earlier. He's like, "Hey, do you want to start at 7?" I'm like, "Do I just need to talk on the phone or do I need to be like on video?" He's like, "Video." I was like, "Oh, can we do it at 8?" Anyways, it worked out because it's 8 o'clock here, so that's not too bad.
We've got about 6 questions that are really straightforward. There's no kind of trick questions or anything tricky in there. That was just help us get a bit of an insight into your kind of day job and how things are in your role, which is at least from my point of view, sounds really glamorous and very exciting. I'm sure there's dull moments as well. But the first kind of question I wanted to ask was, what led you to become a pilot in the first place?
Yeah, for me, it was that whole childhood dream of wanting to be an astronaut. That's kind of where it all started. Like just from whenever I can remember wanting to do anything, I wanted to be an astronaut. So, I went to the library and looked up astronaut and saw they were all military test pilots. And so I just sort of, from there, it was like, well, I'm going to be a military test pilot. So how do you do that? Just kind of backed it up to like, first join the Air Force, get your college degree, go to pilot training, work your way up, be a test pilot. So yeah, it actually all started from that little dream. And I just sort of made this career path for myself and just tried to follow it.
And you knew that early on that that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, as long as I can remember, I remember watching, they had this little kid show. It was called Romper Room. And it was like, I don't know, I was probably nursery school or something, but I remember it was Halloween and this little kid came in, he was dressed up like an astronaut. And I remember back then thinking, no, he can't wear that because that's what I'm going to do. So just from way early.
And what does a typical day as a test pilot for Virgin Orbit look like? Is there a typical day?
Yeah, there isn't too much of a typical day. I would say in the days, probably the busiest days were the days leading up when we were doing our initial flight test, with the rocket attached to the aircraft. And we were also at the same time getting ready for our launch. And a typical day would actually be a lot of meetings, a lot of last minute issues coming up, meetings with engineers, meetings with the safety team, meeting with the flight ops team, and really just charting our plan for like, how'd the last test flight go? What are we going to do on the next one? And then at the same time, trying to think further to, hey, we have the water filled rocket on the aircraft now, because that's what we use to do our testing with. Once we have this thing actually filled with liquid oxygen, how is that going to be different? How are our procedures? So it actually was a lot of like really long days, sometimes just going into Saturdays because there was so much work to get done, so many procedures to get in place, so much data to run through. So yeah, leading up to that, the first launch, it was very busy, but just a lot of meetings, although it's interesting and it's exciting, but sometimes it gets really, it gets to be a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of just day in, day out, and not a lot of flying. That's the part everybody thinks, oh, you're a pilot, you get to fly all the time. Actually, we fly very, very little. But when we do fly, it's always a fairly big milestone flight. There's something that really big that happens in that flight. So they're few and far between. But when we do get our flights in, they're usually pretty spectacular.
And do you get kind of peaks and troughs in the excitement? I remember watching the launch in January, I think it was, on Twitter, and getting very tense and very anxious, given that
Yep.
we're working so closely with you and kind of wishing you well. Do you feel that pressure and excitement?
Yeah. So we had, so that launch was January, and our next launch coming up is going to be early June. So there's about 6 months in between, so you kind of had this launch, then you had the after launch, like it was successful. And there's all this, yay, running through the data and having the meetings on, well, what didn't go so right and what did go right and what are we going to change? And then you kind of get back into the, okay, now we're getting ready for a launch in like 5 months from now. So you sort of get back into, okay, what do we got to change? We get back into the simulator, back into the risk meetings. Okay, what's different about this rocket than the previous one? How do we want to change, how we're operating and how do we document that? So you kind of get back into the ho-hum part of it, just a lot of meetings and paperwork and stuff. And then as we get close to launch, we're getting ready to mate the rocket again, coming up very shortly. Then it gets exciting again.
And how in those periods between launches, how hands-on are you in the development of the technology and the evolution of Cosmic Girl and Launcher One? Is that something you feel you have real input, direct input into the technology?
Yeah, mostly our input has to do with, as far as changing the rocket itself and how it operates, that's up to the propulsion team and the rocket team. But then how that impacts how we operate, how our procedures, how we handle if systems don't work, if we have system failures, like how do we handle that? What do we do? What's the plan? Do we need to actually put some more software in to handle some of these problems versus trying to handle them with the launch engineers manually in the back? So yeah, there's actually a lot of input, which is kind of the fun part of being in a small, well, we're not so small anymore, but relatively small compared to like a Boeing or a Lockheed. But being at the beginning of it, we have a lot of impact. I mean, every individual on every team actually has a lot of impact on the operations and the whole program going forward.
And you said earlier on, this has kind of been your dream ever since you were young. So you've obviously got a wider perspective on the space sector and wanting to be an astronaut. What do you think Virgin Orbit can contribute to the development of the space sector? Thinking just more generally.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Virgin Orbit brings is it gives access to space for smaller companies, for universities, even environmental companies. I mean, it kind of opens up space to this whole realm of companies that may have not had access before because it was very expensive. Our goal is to make it very inexpensive and very flexible and responsible to get small satellites in orbit, not have to have someone wait 2 years until a launch schedule allows them to piggyback. But we could say, hey, we'll put you up in 2 months, we'll put you up in 3 months. So our goal is to actually gain access to space for smaller companies and universities.
And how much, you're obviously working with Spaceport Cornwall, but you've got other spaceport partners across the world. How important is that network around the globe to be able to meet that customer demand to move quickly? Is that a key part of the business?
Yeah, it's a very key part because it's one of the things that really sets us apart from other launch, from vertical launch, is the fact that we could go anywhere. I mean, you need to have the facilities set up. You need to do the safety investigation to make sure that you can operate safely out of there. But the beauty of us is we can operate literally anywhere you can take off and land a 747. And that's a huge, huge part of our model. And that's what makes us very flexible. And it also gives different countries the ability to launch easily off their soil without having to build an entire vertical launch structure.
And from our point of view, one of the things that we're really keen to work with Virgin on is not just the launch, but the whole supply chain. We have partners here in the space sector at Goonhilly Earth Station, as well as Spaceport Cornwall. Have you seen the kind of growing of the space sector around Virgin Orbit and around some of your other partners across the world?
Definitely. It seems like we're at sort of this inflection point for space and space access and companies that support space and support space access. Yes, it's a huge growth. I mean, we can see right around our company, other companies popping up, like right around where Virgin Orbit sits in Long Beach.
Great. And do you see the kind of benefits? I'm still kind of, as someone who didn't know what they want to do and still doesn't really know what they want to do, I'm kind of in awe of your kind of vision and seeing that through. And one of the things that we're seeing locally is how Virgin Orbit, the space sector, is really inspiring young people. We've talked to thousands of young people from a wide range of backgrounds about how Spaceport Cornwall and the space sector could be part of their career path. Is that something that you've been involved in talking to young people in other parts of the world?
Yeah, mostly I think I've talked to probably within the U.S. to young people anywhere from elementary school up to college, even young professionals. And what I think Virgin Orbit does a great job of is really putting together some great packages on showing what we do and how there are so many different disciplines involved. In other words, you don't have to be a pilot, and spend 20 years in the military, to do this. It's like you could be a technician, you could be a logistician, you could be a finance specialist, and you are going to have a part, of this incredible journey.
Great. I think that's one of the things that we're really keen to kind of get across to young people in Cornwall, which has been in the past seen as a bit peripheral to UK and Europe, but with digital technologies, with people being able to see a place for themselves in kind of STEM science careers, spaceport seems to be really inspiring young people, which is great.
Yeah, I think the more people actually see it or actually see things happen. It's one thing to kind of read about, oh, hey, here's all the possibility of things. And then you're like, wow, look at this video of this airplane taking off and launching a rocket off its wing. And then look, as we show the video of this satellite going all the way up, and you see the Earth behind it, you see the separation of the stage. I mean, you actually see it happening. It's a whole different thing than just, thinking you're theoretically talking about something.
Yeah. And what has been your career highlight so far, either working for Virgin Orbit or more broadly in terms of piloting and the space sector?
Yeah, I would say so far, the last 2 launches in Virgin Orbit would be my highlight. I mean, honestly, the first launch, the rocket wasn't successful, but the launch operation was completely successful. I mean, we actually proved that we could fuel the rocket on the wing, taxi out, take off. We dropped it right on parameters. And then the rocket in the early, few seconds had an issue. It got fixed. But that for me was it was the first program that I had got to run from the very beginning, because I started when we first got the airplane all the way through it being modified, putting on the pylon, coming up, with a couple engineers for the entire test program, flying the whole test program, coming up with the procedures on how we were going to operate with the cryogenics on board, how we're going to operate with the launch engineers. So it was a culmination of this, 5 years of work through the entire thing to actually drop that rocket, see it light. And then the beauty was we came back, learned what happened, made some engineering changes, design changes, came back in January, and then the second launch to watch it be successful. I mean, that would be so far the highlight.
Well, I was excited and I wasn't even there. So, are you expecting to be in Cornwall for the launch next year? Or is it too early to say?
It's too early to say. So we're in the process. We've transitioned. There's a new chief pilot that's taken over for Virgin Orbit, Eric Bippert. So he's taken over. He'll actually fly left seat. I'll fly right seat for this next launch, and that'll be his checkout. And for me, I was originally hired at Virgin Galactic and then slid over. Launcher One started as part of Virgin Galactic, and then the company split off. And so I stayed with the program to get it through the first launch. And now I'm transitioning back to Virgin Galactic to keep pursuing my goal of actually flying to space. So I'm shedding a lot of the responsibility over to Eric, who's picking it up. And so he'll be actually running the operation as we press forward to going to, out to Cornwall, to Guam, and to other spaceports. That's sort of what he came on board to do, is take it from, we've proven our concept. Now let's make this thing an operational and take it worldwide. But hopefully, I'm sure I'll be able to be there. I really want to be there.
And will that be your first time in Cornwall, or have you been here
it
before?
Will.
If you are.
No, that'd be my first time. Yeah.
Well, I hope you are here. We look forward to seeing if you are.
I hear there's some surfing there. Is that true?
There's definitely some surfing. There's definitely good food and drink. There's definitely a great environment. One of the things that our local university, which is a creative industries and tech university, talks about, which is Falmouth University, they talk about themselves as California. So we hope that there's a more than a passing resemblance in the future, not only to the lifestyle in California, but also the kind of economic boom that there's been in parts of California over the last few years. So we hope to emulate all of that.
Great.
Hopefully it'll feel like home if you come over.
Oh, I'm sure I will.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. That was all the kind of questions we had. Really appreciate you making time so early in the day and such short notice. It's really helpful.
Yep, no problem.